He always believed he was an only child. But when his mother passed away, her will revealed a devastating secret: he had a half-sister, lost somewhere in the world. A billionaire with everything, except the family he never knew he was missing. Now, he's about to risk it all to find a sister who doesn't even know he exists. When David walked into the room for the will reading, he felt an overwhelming sadness wash over him. His mother had just passed away after a long battle with illness. All that remained now was a will and memories. He had prepared himself to hear about the massive fortune his mother had left behind, something he had imagined many times before, but he never expected the will to deliver such a shock. The first sentences the lawyer read were unsurprising: the valuable assets, the investments, the companies his mother left to him. But then, an unexpected sentence made David jolt: "I have a secret I never shared with anyone, and I hope you will understand when you read these words." In that moment, the whole atmosphere in the room seemed to freeze. Those words kept circling in his mind. How could a will contain a secret he had never heard of? A secret his mother had kept hidden her entire life. A sense of bewilderment, confusion, and even a bit of panic rose inside David. He couldn't think of any reason why his mother would hide something so important from him. He had believed he knew everything about his mother. But now, everything he thought he knew seemed to lose meaning. What in her past had made her keep a secret she only revealed after her death? The next line in the will made everything clearer, and at the same time, even more complicated. His mother, the woman he had always admired, had been in another relationship before marrying his father. And the most shocking part: she had a daughter from that relationship. This changed everything. David's entire life suddenly turned into one big question: why had his mother hidden this? Why had she never mentioned he had a sister? Who was this daughter? Why had his mother never told him about her? David felt more confused than ever. He had never even imagined the possibility of having a sister, because his mother had never once mentioned it. The image he had of his mother, a resilient, loving woman, now felt blurry. He suddenly felt as if he were standing before a mysterious wall he had never noticed his whole life. David wondered, could he accept this truth? Could he understand why his mother had hidden it? He had always thought his family was a perfect home, but now everything seemed to be falling apart right before his eyes. As he heard this revelation, David felt as if everything around him had suddenly turned into a hazy fog. He had never imagined having a sister, let alone that his mother had an emotional life before meeting his father. Each sentence in the will felt like a knife cutting through the peace in his mind. His mother had always been the one holding the family together, a strong, determined woman, yet she had a past he had never known. David tried to calm himself, but the more he thought about it, the more disappointed he felt. Why hadn't his mother told him? Had she ever felt guilty for hiding it? Unanswered questions kept swirling in David's head. He wondered if his mother's silence meant she feared he wouldn't be able to accept such a painful truth. Mixed emotions surged within him. David was so used to being in control of everything in his life, but now he felt utterly powerless before a secret he couldn't fully grasp. Anger flared up in David's chest. He couldn't understand why his mother had hidden this from him. She hadn't just kept a sister from him, but an entire important part of her past. This wasn't just some random event, it was part of a larger story she had left behind. David felt deceived, as if his whole life had been built on a false foundation. He couldn't help but feel betrayed. He didn't understand why his mother couldn't trust him enough to share this. Whatever reason she had, the secrecy made David feel hurt. He had grown up in a family he had always believed was perfect. His mother had always taught him the values of honesty, of family unity, yet she had hidden an important part of herself. David wondered if everything he knew about his family was truly real, or if it had all just been a curtain hiding the truth. Even though he was angry, part of David couldn't deny that he was deeply curious about this sister. He had never thought he would have a sister. And now, a sense of responsibility began to rise in him. Even though his mother had kept it hidden for so many years, now was perhaps the time for him to find her, to give her the chance to know their family. He wondered where she was living, whether she knew about him, and whether they could rebuild this relationship from scratch. David realized that, despite his mother's secrecy, this girl also had the right to know the truth, the right to meet him, and become part of his life. The sense of responsibility grew stronger, and he began thinking about the journey to find her. He knew this wouldn't be a simple search. It was an opportunity to repair the cracks in the family, a chance to change both his life and hers. As the lawyer continued reading, an even more surprising detail was revealed. His mother had not only left part of the inheritance to the girl, but she had set a clear condition: if David found her within 1 year, the girl would receive a massive portion of the estate. This made David even more confused. He had never imagined that searching for a sister would become a race against time, and even less that there was a huge fortune waiting behind it. David looked at the lawyer, unable to fully grasp what he had just said. A vast inheritance, set aside specifically for a girl he had never met. Was this the reason his mother had hidden her all these years? And was this the challenge she had left for him to fulfill her final wish? In the end, David stood up, his mind spinning with thousands of thoughts. Could he really do this? The story begins with a powerful decision David made right after receiving his mother's will. Unable to stand still and accept a life full of unanswered questions, he knew he had to act. All he had was a faded old photograph, the only puzzle piece he could use to reconnect the story of his family. So, he decided to hire an international team of investigators, people he believed could help uncover even the smallest clues. It wasn't an easy decision. David was used to doing everything on his own, solving problems by himself. But this time, the story wasn't just his, it belonged to a sister he had never met. He had to do everything he could to find her, no matter how difficult the journey would be. These investigators weren't just good at digging up information, they could also help him overcome any challenges along the way. As soon as the team got to work, David felt like he was opening a new chapter in his life. This wasn't just a search for a missing sister, it was also a chance to understand his mother better. A woman he had always respected but who had kept a part of her past hidden, a part David now had to face. The only clue David had was the old photograph his mother had left in the will. It showed his mother standing with a little girl, about 3 years old, smiling brightly in front of a small house in France. Everything about the picture was blurry, but to David, it was all he had. He didn't know who the little girl was, didn't know where she might be living now. All he could do was trust those faint clues and start the search from there. When the investigators provided him with a copy of the photo and began their work, David felt like he had found a flicker of light in the darkness. He imagined what the photo might reveal, wondered if the little girl was still living there, if the people in the photo knew anything about his mother, if they could help him find her. Each time the investigators uncovered a new lead, David felt like he was one step closer to solving the mystery his mother had hidden all these years. At the same time, the vagueness of the photo weighed on him. He couldn't know what truth lay behind it. What if the little girl was no longer alive? What if she had lived an entirely different life, one his mother had never shared? All these questions left David uneasy. But he had no choice but to continue the journey, the search began in Paris, where the photo had been taken. David couldn't sit still and hope everything would fall into place, so he decided to travel to France, visiting the places where his mother had once lived and worked. Each step he took was filled with doubt, but also determination. The first meetings left David astonished as he discovered that his mother had once had relationships and memories he had never heard about. They spoke of his mother as a strong woman who stood firm through difficulties but who also had moments of weakness, longing for love and protection. From France, David didn't stop. He continued on to Italy, where his mother had lived for a long time, and then to Spain, where she had close friends. Every trip brought surprising new stories about the mother he thought he knew so well. They told him about the hardships she had faced, the times she had to choose between love and her career. And in every story, David felt like he was uncovering a completely different person, a mother he had never truly understood. There were times when David felt like he was wandering through a maze with no way out. Everything was vague, and each encounter only added to his exhaustion. But at the same time, these stories gradually helped him realize that his mother's life was far more complex than he had imagined. She had once had a complicated past, and the decisions she made had shaped both her life and his. Every meeting brought a new surprise, a new story David had never heard. He discovered that his mother wasn't just the strong, resilient woman he had always imagined, she was also someone filled with pain, with unfulfilled desires. Old friends of his mother told him about the times she cried over the choices she had to make. The times she had to bury her dreams for the sake of her family. His mother, whom he had always thought of as invincible, had soft, vulnerable sides no one had ever seen. One of the most painful stories was learning that his mother had loved another man before marrying his father. That man, according to an old friend, had been a very important part of her life, but for some reason, she had to give up that love and marry David's father, a man she never loved the same way. These details made David realize that his mother's life wasn't a series of simple decisions, it was a series of difficult, sacrificial choices. David couldn't help but feel a deep sorrow for his mother, but at the same time, he felt like he understood more about the decisions she had made. He realized that everyone has their own past, their own pains that no one else can fully understand. And in the process of searching for his sister, he was also searching for himself, a son rediscovering his relationship with his mother, someone learning to better understand what had happened in the past. One of the most miraculous parts of this journey was that David not only searched for his sister but also uncovered things about his mother he had never known. The meetings and the stories about his mother opened up a whole new world for him. He realized that she had been a strong woman, but also someone full of emotions, pain, and sacrifice. The things he thought he had understood about her now became unanswered questions. David began to see his mother not just as a parent but as a woman with her own dreams, desires, and choices she had been forced to make throughout her life. These encounters not only helped him understand his mother better but also reminded him of the values she had taught him: resilience, sacrifice, and the strength to face life's challenges. When everything seemed like it was nearing its end, an unexpected encounter changed everything. A witness, an old friend of David's mother, revealed that the sister might have been taken to the United States as a small child and given a new name. This made David's entire plan more complicated than ever. It was no longer just about finding a sister he had never known, now he had to face an even bigger secret: was she still alive? And did she even remember her mother? David felt like he was standing at a difficult crossroads, with everything becoming more complicated and vague than ever. But the one thing he knew was that he wouldn't give up. Because he understood that only by moving forward could he uncover the truth. After many long days of searching, the faint clues finally led David to a small town in America, where he discovered the name of his sister. She was Emma, an ordinary woman living a simple life in a remote town. Emma had no idea of his existence, nor did she know anything about the family legacy David carried. She worked as a preschool teacher, caring for little children and nurturing them with boundless love. Each day for her was a journey filled with small, meaningful moments. There were no luxurious comforts or fame like what David was used to. Emma lived by very different values. David knew that everything had changed the moment he realized he had a sister. Until now, he had lived a life filled with power and prestige, but now he faced a completely different challenge: how to approach her when her life was so drastically different from everything he had ever known. He couldn't simply walk up and say, "I'm your brother," when she knew nothing about him. And this left him more confused than ever. Emma had her own life, and he had no idea how to step into her world without disrupting it. David arrived in the small town on a secret trip. He didn't want to reveal his identity right away. Instead, he chose to observe Emma from a distance, quietly walking around the preschool where she worked. Every morning, she would walk to school with a bright smile, her warm eyes looking at the children as if they were her entire world. Each afternoon, she spent time caring for the little ones, explaining each lesson carefully, teaching them about love, respect, and the joy of learning. From afar, David saw a completely different Emma, not a wealthy woman, not someone living in luxury, but a simple person who lived fully for the small and meaningful things in daily life. But there was something that broke David's heart. Emma knew nothing about him, and all the memories of his mother seemed to be completely absent from her life. David's mother had hidden from her an entire part of the past, and that made him feel uneasy. He didn't know what to do when standing before a sister he had never met. This wasn't the feeling of a wealthy, powerful man. It was the feeling of someone who was now facing the truth that a part of his family had been hidden away in the shadows for too long. Once he had gathered enough information and dared to face the reality, David began to feel a deep inner conflict. He was a billionaire, living in a world of power, while Emma was just an ordinary preschool teacher, living a simple life completely disconnected from fame or wealth. How could he approach her when the gap between them was so enormous? How could he face a sister he had only just discovered without turning her world upside down? David knew he couldn't use his fame or power to approach Emma. He understood that if he simply revealed who he was, everything would change. Emma would feel threatened. She would think he only wanted to take advantage of her. So David decided to choose a different approach. He would not let material things or status interfere with the bond between them. Instead, he decided to keep his identity a secret and find a way to get to know Emma as naturally as possible. Determined not to disturb Emma's life, David decided to pretend to be a tourist. He picked a beautiful day and visited her preschool, posing as a visitor from the big city, curious to hear interesting stories about the small town. Emma had no idea who the man standing in front of her really was, and David wasn't in a rush to reveal himself. Their connection began through harmless conversations, sometimes about fun stories from the city, sometimes about the simple life in this little town. David realized that when he was no longer a billionaire but just a friend, he could see Emma more genuinely. These simple conversations gradually opened a new door for David. He no longer saw her just as a sister but as a real human being, with worries, dreams, and a life full of challenges. Their relationship was not shaped by money or status. They were just two people, meeting, sharing, and understanding each other. Every time he talked with Emma, David felt the warmth of her heart. She never spoke of sadness or hardships, but David knew her life wasn't always easy. Emma was a strong woman, always keeping her spirit up despite many challenges. Their conversations about the children in her class, the joy of watching them grow, or the struggles she faced daily, made David feel a deep respect for her. Emma had a strong will to live, and this moved David deeply. Every time he looked at her, he thought about himself, a billionaire, living in luxury yet missing the values Emma held. She understood the real treasures in life, and that touched David's heart. He realized that even though his life lacked nothing materially, it lacked genuine connections like this. Emma made him feel the warmth of human connection, something he had sometimes forgotten in his lavish world. One afternoon, while they were having coffee together, Emma unexpectedly shared a big problem she was facing. Her adoptive father, who had raised her since she was a child, was suffering from a severe illness. This not only affected his health but had also plunged her family into financial hardship. Yet, Emma refused all offers of help. She didn't want anyone to feel she was a burden, and she took great pride in being able to handle everything herself. This made David feel both tender and worried. He saw a strong woman, but also one full of pride and self-respect, who would never want to accept help from strangers, even in such difficult times. Faced with Emma's situation, David felt deeply conflicted. He wanted to help her, to do something to improve her family's circumstances, but he couldn't reveal who he was. He knew that if he offered help, Emma would likely refuse immediately and misunderstand his intentions. So David had no choice but to watch from afar, his heart aching as he saw Emma confronting a huge challenge she hadn't shared with anyone. The days living near Emma made David feel that their bond was growing stronger than ever. He knew he couldn't hide the truth about his identity forever, but how could he bring it up when everything between them was still so new? He had lived his whole life without knowing much about his sister, and Emma knew nothing at all about him. They had shared so many stories together, but never spoke of family, never mentioned the past. Many times during their conversations, he could only sit quietly, listening to her stories, unable to reveal anything about his own family. Every night, David wrestled with the same question: should I tell the truth now, or keep playing the role of a friend? He feared that if he spoke up, Emma wouldn't be able to accept it. He worried she'd feel betrayed, that her life would be thrown into chaos. But he also knew that if he stayed silent, he would never truly connect with her. Each passing day, this relationship became more important to him, and he realized he couldn't keep hiding anymore. In those moments, every time he looked at Emma, David felt even more deeply the importance of revealing the truth. He knew that if she could understand and accept it, they wouldn't just be friends, they would be family, truly close to each other. But it was such a difficult step, a challenge David had never anticipated. Finally, nothing could hold him back anymore. One afternoon, as they sat together at a small roadside cafe, the soft golden light of the evening sun filtered through the trees, casting a strangely peaceful atmosphere. In that moment, David's heart couldn't bear it any longer. The words he had kept inside for so many years now felt like something he had to say, no matter how hard it was. Looking straight into Emma's eyes, gently but firmly, he spoke, "Emma, I'm your half-brother. We share the same mother." Those words dropped into the peaceful afternoon like a bomb. Emma froze, unable to believe what she had just heard. She looked at him, her eyes wide and blank, unable to grasp it. A heavy silence fell over them, broken only by the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. She thought she had misheard, or that this was some kind of joke, a joke too cruel to accept. What did you just say?" Emma asked, her voice trembling as if the words were too much to believe. David looked into her eyes, not rushing, carefully trying to explain. But the long silence only made Emma more confused. She couldn't understand, how could he be her brother when she had never, ever had a brother? Her mind was spinning, unable to find the words to refute it. She just kept shaking her head, as if wanting it all to be just a joke. But David didn't stop. He had made his decision, and there was no turning back. Hearing David's words, Emma was almost unable to process it. She had never imagined she had a brother, let alone a brother like David. She looked at him for a long moment, as if searching for some sign that this was all a joke. "You're joking, right?" She blurted out, her face full of doubt. "You can't be my brother. I've never had a brother, how could that be?" She couldn't believe what she was hearing. It felt like a powerful shock. Everything she thought she knew about her life, her family, suddenly crumbled. She couldn't believe that all her life, she had never known of David's existence. Why had no one told her? Why had her mother, the woman she always believed had abandoned her, hidden such a huge secret? Emma began to feel exhausted, unsure what to do with everything that was happening. She stood up, took a few steps away, then turned back to look at David with eyes full of doubt. "You want me to believe this? Believe all of this?" she said, her voice tired and full of disappointment. "You're just joking, right?" But David wasn't someone who gave up easily. He knew that for Emma to believe him, he needed to prove everything. David said no more. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photo, a black and white picture of his mother holding a child, Emma, when she was little. He handed her the photo, softly saying, "This is the photo my mother kept, and I know you're the child in this picture. This is what she left for me." He also showed her documents, handwritten notes from his mother in her final years. Emma looked at the photo, the notes, things she had never seen or expected. She couldn't stop the tears from falling. Her life had never been turned upside down like this before. Everything she thought she knew about herself suddenly felt completely overturned. It was all too sudden. Too painful. She began to feel a powerful shift inside, realizing that everything she had believed for so long was wrong, and then, the flood of emotions overwhelmed them both. David looked at Emma, feeling a deep sorrow. He couldn't fully rejoice at finding his sister because he knew too much time had already been lost. They hadn't been able to grow up together, hadn't shared beautiful childhood memories. Each passing day, each moment they had lived apart, was a lost moment they could never get back. Emma felt it too. She couldn't help but think of all the years she had spent alone, without family, without a brother, yet, within all these complicated emotions, one thing was clear: they had found each other. Even though time had passed, even though it was too late to change the past, they had still found each other in this world. And that, even if it couldn't replace what was lost, was something worth cherishing. But just when everything seemed to have been laid bare, Emma revealed a secret David never expected. "Actually, I've known about your mother for a long time," she said, her voice no longer doubtful, but thoughtful. "Your mother. I'd heard people talk about her, but I always thought she abandoned me. She never came looking for me, and I didn't want to look for her either." David looked at her, his eyes wide with surprise. He couldn't fully understand why Emma felt that way. But after everything, he knew this was something important for them to understand about each other, something they needed to face together so they could heal old wounds, and move forward, side by side. After the truth was revealed, and after the moments filled with emotion, David and Emma realized they needed to sit down and talk. Not just to understand each other better, but also to find peace within themselves. David decided to take the time to share his life story, the losses and the pain he had endured. He talked about his childhood, about a broken family, about the years he spent in loneliness and his relentless efforts to achieve success. He wasn't afraid to share the deepest parts of his heart. Emma, in turn, opened up to David, telling him about her years of hardship, growing up without a family, and the struggles in life. She spoke about her adoptive father, about the sacrifices he made for her, but also how, at times, she felt like an outsider, never truly belonging. These stories weren't filled with happy memories, but through each word, they both realized they had so much in common. They had both suffered, both been hurt, but now they weren't alone anymore. They had found each other, and this story brought them closer than ever before. Amid laughter and tears, David and Emma began to sense something important. No matter how full of challenges life might be, they could overcome it together. Neither of them was perfect, but their stories had created a bond that was unbreakable. They shared not just their sadness, but also their hopes and dreams for a better future. And from that moment, they understood that forgiveness isn't just an act, but a long process of rebuilding trust and affection between two people. After taking the time to understand each other, David decided to help Emma with the challenges she was facing. One of the biggest issues she was dealing with at the time was her adoptive father's illness. She couldn't afford the medical expenses, and this left her feeling hopeless. With his financial stability, David didn't hesitate to offer his help. He not only took her adoptive father to the best hospitals but also covered all the treatment costs, giving him the chance to live longer and healthier. Throughout this process, Emma was deeply moved by David's kindness. She had once thought that rich people only cared about money and fame, but David proved otherwise. He didn't just help her financially, but he also showed her that love and genuine care were more valuable than anything else. As her adoptive father began to recover, she felt immense gratitude, not only because David had helped her father but also because he had come into her life just when she needed him most. Moreover, David introduced Emma to his family and friends, people who lived in a completely different world from the one she was familiar with. Emma felt out of place, unable to fit into a space so unfamiliar and full of luxury. However, this didn't make her feel happier, it only heightened her sense of being lost. She began to wonder if she truly belonged there. But David was always by her side, helping her feel comfortable and continuing to encourage her. Gradually, Emma realized that not everything in life had to be tied to wealth or luxury. What mattered more were the people, the genuine values they shared. Although David did everything he could to help Emma feel at ease in his world, every time they attended a fancy party or event he was involved in, Emma always felt like an outsider. Everyone around them lived in luxury and abundance, while she carried the worries of a simple life. Every time she stepped into a vast mansion or met David's friends, she felt out of place. She feared she wouldn't be able to fit in, that she would always be an outsider in this world. That feeling wasn't easy to overcome. Even though David was always there, the feeling of not belonging, of being different in this world, still left Emma feeling isolated. She feared that David wouldn't fully understand what she was going through, that he would lose patience with her worries. In those moments, Emma just wanted to return to her old life, where she didn't have to worry about judgmental looks or the opinions of others. But David always knew how to calm her, showing her that nothing was more important than the love and sincerity they shared. David also realized that, for Emma, not everything could be solved with money. He understood that she wasn't looking for wealth or fame. What she needed was someone who understood her, someone who would always be there for her and accept her for who she truly was. And that's when David realized that true connection wasn't about material things, but about the genuine feelings they shared. Over time, through conversations and meetings, David began to realize that money couldn't solve everything. No matter how much wealth he had or how many good relationships he built, if there wasn't sincere affection, everything would be meaningless. He recognized that he had been living in a world full of luxury, but lacking the truly important values. He had tried to use money to make everything easier, but now he realized that money couldn't heal the wounds in his heart. Through his connection with Emma, David understood that love and sincerity were the things that could heal the wounds both of them had endured. Though they came from two very different worlds, they could still understand each other, empathize, and share their pains and losses. That was the value David found in life, not money, but love and empathy. One day, after months of getting to know each other, David and Emma decided to visit their mothers' graves together. This was the first time they had ever visited the resting place of the woman they both loved, even though they had never really had the chance to live alongside her. Standing in front of the grave, they felt a sense of peace, but also a closeness, a connection that they had never experienced before. This was not just a resting place, but the beginning of a new family. In that moment, they both felt that family wasn't just about blood relations, but about those who were willing to share, love, and protect each other. No matter how much time passed, these values would always endure. Emma looked at the gravestone of her mother, and silent tears fell. She felt as if she were finding a part of herself that she had never understood before. They stood there, without saying a word, only feeling the peace and love they had for their mother, and also for each other. That meeting changed David. He began to reassess his life, no longer focused on increasing his wealth or fame. Instead of thinking only about his company, he decided he wanted to do something more meaningful, to leave a true mark in this world. And that came to him when he thought about his mother and Emma. He decided to establish an educational fund in their names, helping poor children get the opportunity to attend school. David knew that, with the wealth he had, he could help thousands, even millions of children, and that was how he could truly change the world. He didn't need to be the richest person in society, but he could be the one who helped change the future for many generations. By deciding to give up a large portion of his wealth, David not only found true happiness but also realized that, in this life, the most valuable things aren't money, but what we leave behind for future generations. After months of living in loneliness and pain, David and Emma finally found a new meaning in life. As they looked back on everything they had gone through, they realized they not only needed each other but also needed to help children who were struggling with life's challenges. Together, they decided to open a charitable center to help orphans, children who had lost their parents and had no place to turn. The center wasn't just a shelter, it was a place where these kids could find love, care, and the opportunity to study just like any other child. As they built the center together, David and Emma began to feel they were no longer living just for themselves. They sensed they were contributing to something much bigger, helping children who might one day change the world. The charity center became their second home, where every passing day was filled with hope and faith in a brighter future. They were not just saving the children. Through this journey, they were also saving themselves, rediscovering their true purpose in life. David was no longer a man chasing after money or fame. He had realized that life held far more important things, and true values could not be measured by wealth. The feeling of seeing the children smile, watching them grow every day thanks to the love and support they provided, it was something David had never experienced before. And for Emma, this was the first time she truly felt valuable, not because she was an heiress or part of the wealthy world, but because she had done something good for this world. Together, They embarked on a new journey, one no longer about the past or their pain, but about the children and about hope. Emma's story, a life full of challenges, but ultimately rising above and transforming her destiny, became a source of inspiration for millions. Every time she shared her journey, people couldn't hold back their tears. She wasn't just a woman who had overcome hardship, she was living proof of resilience, a testament to the belief that no matter how terrible life gets, we can stand up and start again. Emma's story convinced many people that no challenge is too great and no dream is impossible. Emma began appearing on television shows and at conferences, where she shared her story and inspired others. She wasn't just helping children, she was helping countless adults who were feeling lost or hopeless in life. She taught them how to rise after a fall, how to find faith in themselves, and how to keep living even when life was hard. Every time people heard Emma speak about her journey, they felt the power of perseverance and love. With every word she shared, Emma lit a fire in the hearts of others. She was no longer the abandoned orphan girl lost in an indifferent world. She had become a symbol of strength and resilience. And through her story, David realized that it wasn't just him who could change his life. People like Emma, who could let go of everything and rebuild, were the ones who truly changed the world. In the past, David had lived a life focused solely on money and fame. All his goals revolved around becoming wealthy and successful. But the more he achieved, the more he felt empty. Those successes couldn't fill the void in his heart. He had once thought that the more assets he had, the happier he would be, but now he realized that true happiness doesn't come from money. After meeting Emma and beginning the journey to change his life, he felt, for the first time, that he was truly living, no longer chasing after shallow things. David's feeling of truly living with genuine values, working each day for others, for the children he and Emma were helping, was a feeling he had never known before. The children's smiles, their hopeful eyes, were the greatest reward he could ever receive. He was no longer living for himself, but for those around him, living for the positive changes he could bring to the world. And that was the moment David felt true peace in his heart, knowing he had found the right path, the path to real happiness. Throughout their journey together, David and Emma not only created change for those around them, but they also found ways to fulfill their mother's unfinished dreams. Their mother, though no longer here, had always wanted to bring a better future to children, especially her own. To honor her memory, David and Emma decided to travel the world, visiting the places their mother had once wanted to see, completing the plans she had left behind. They traveled to distant lands, helping impoverished communities, building educational and medical centers. They knew their mother, though unable to see all of this, would surely be proud of what they had done. Every step they took on that path carried their mother in their hearts, as a source of encouragement and strength. And through this journey, David and Emma not only fulfilled their mother's dreams but also made their own dreams come true. On a special occasion, during a grand ceremony attended by many famous figures, David decided to share his family's story. He spoke about the journey of finding his loved ones, about the past pains and the forgiveness that had led him to a new life. He spoke about Emma, about the love she had brought, and about what they had built together. Their story, from strangers to deep connection, touched the hearts of the millions present at the event. As David recounted the losses and hardships he and Emma had overcome, quiet tears fell from the audience. People could feel the sincerity and love in David's every word. It wasn't just a story about their family, but a story about forgiveness, about the power of love, and the belief in change. Stories like theirs didn't just bring tears, they sparked hope and resilience in those who heard them. When their story had been shared and everyone had felt their strength and perseverance, Emma unexpectedly revealed something huge. she was getting married. To everyone's surprise, Emma announced that David, the brother she had reunited with, would be the one to walk her down the aisle. This was the perfect moment to conclude their tearful and challenging journey because, at last, their family had found true happiness. On that special day, as David walked Emma down the aisle, he wasn't just her brother, he was her lifelong companion. They had walked together through the darkest days to finally reach the light of happiness and love. And that was the ending of a beautiful story, a story about family, about love, and about the things that matter most in life.